for joining today's Jamf Security webinar. We're currently waiting for a few more people to join this event, so we're going to wait around 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, we will begin the webinar shortly. Thank you for your patience.
We'll get started in just about another minute.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Jamf Security, Powerful Defense for Your App and Work. Our speaker today will be Michael Covington, President of Portfolio Strategy. Before we begin, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them in the QA box, and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. You can also expand your slide area by clicking on the maximize icon on the top of the slide viewer. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the help widget. If you can please take a moment and fill out the survey at the end of the webinar, that would be very helpful. And with that, I will pass it on to Michael Covington to start off today's presentation.
Thanks very much. Really excited to be here today to talk about Jamf Security and what is ultimately really powerful defensive capabilities for Apple compute devices used at work. And to start off, I wanted to give just a little bit of background on Jamf for those of you that may not be familiar with the company or haven't followed the enhancements to our portfolio over the last couple of years. Our mission at its core is really focused on helping organizations succeed with Apple. We do have a broad portfolio of capabilities that we'll really scrub in and talk about quite a bit today, focused on helping organizations manage and secure Apple devices used at work. To give you a sense of our global customer footprint, we have just over 72,000 active Jamf customers today, who collectively manage and secure a little over 30 million devices across our platform. We also operate and maintain Jamf Nation. For those of you who are not familiar with that, it's a public-facing community of Mac mobile admins who come together to solve shared problems and really are focused on helping to make macOS, iOS, iPadOS devices successful in the workplace, along with everything else that falls within the Apple ecosystem. You can see there on the slide a sense of who some of our customers are today. 7 of the top 10 top technology companies, 9 of the top 10 largest companies in the world utilize our solutions, and 22 of the top 25 world's most valuable brands utilize Jamf technologies today. Our focus is really on helping to simplify work. Your organizations are choosing to utilize Apple devices largely because of the great experience that they provide to your workers. And what we want to do is make sure that the technologies that we are providing to help make those devices manageable and secured within the workplace, that those technologies don't get in the way of that great user experience. And at the same time, we can bring a delightful administrative experience to your IT teams and your security teams that are overseeing these technologies as well. One of the key things that we do when we start working with organizations is we ask them two very targeted questions, largely as we're working with them to explore the challenges that they're looking to address as they're bringing modern technologies into their workplace and really implementing on their digital transformation plans. The first is end user focused. What we ask them is, do your employees love their work technology as much as their home technology? Many organizations are choosing to adopt modern devices like mobiles and Macs, and they're also starting up choice programs where they're giving workers the choice of platform that they want to work with, where they feel that they can be their most productive selves. Making sure that your end users enjoy working with the technology is really key to not only recruiting and retaining talent, but really helping to maximize productivity at work at the same time. The other key question that we ask, though, along with the love of technology from the end user perspective is, does the organization trust that every one of these new devices and the people that utilize them accessing the networks, data, and applications within the workplace are safe? And a lot of times modern technologies, modern devices have been left out of the security infrastructure that organizations have historically utilized. A lot of reasons for that. Modern devices, mobile in particular, are often used off the company campus, outside of the networks that you own and operate. And so a lot of the infrastructure that you've set up at the edge doesn't always apply to those devices that are used outside. The other is that modern operating systems, iOS, Android, macOS in particular, they use new frameworks, and a lot of times legacy security technologies don't always work so well on these new platforms. We want to make sure that as you are modernizing your infrastructure and the devices that are used for work, that you not only can achieve that love from your employees in that technology, but that you also can make sure that those devices fit the trust model that your organization has in place, and that you ultimately want to achieve. This is why we talk about something that we've branded trusted access. Now, I'm going to spend a lot of time today talking about trusted access, and it's not a product or a solution from Jamf. Instead, it's an outcome. We've spent a lot of time talking with partners, technology integration partners, with customers about what it is that organizations are ultimately trying to achieve with their technology. And we have found that a lot of times it's really difficult to achieve your desired outcomes because of the product silos that have historically been put in place. We want to break the mold on those silos and instead focus on the outcomes. And when we talk about security in modern work, it largely resolves around this outcome of trusted access. And to spell it out, what trusted access is to us at Jamf, it is an outcome that ensures that only authorized users on enrolled devices, that is, devices that you've established a relationship with and that you trust, that meet your organizational requirements, that are secure, that are compliant, only then can they access sensitive data. Now, this is a relatively easy framework to articulate. It's much more difficult to implement, particularly when you're talking about solutions that are brought together from many different vendors. And for those of you looking at the screen saying, this is zero trust, you're absolutely right. What we are ultimately talking about here is realizing the zero trust dream that many organizations have put down on paper, but have struggled to implement. And with the Jamf security portfolio, we are able to offer organizations a streamlined way of implementing this outcome. And I'll walk you through the different capabilities that we have within our portfolio, but I'll also talk to you about some of the integrations and opportunities we have to leverage third-party solutions as part of that outcome. Now, trusted access is not something that you could achieve within a single kind of legacy product silo, if you will. It really does require you to bring together the best of device and application management, identity and access technologies, and endpoint security capabilities. All of this is what's really needed to ultimately ensure that only authorized users on devices that are enrolled and that are trusted, that meet your organizational requirements, can have access to your most critical data sets and applications. And what I want to do for today's discussion is really break this down. I want to talk about the different technologies that are needed to bring this to bear. And I also want to talk about the journey to achieving this outcome, because one of the things that we've realized is that it's near impossible to go from 0 to 100% with implementation of trusted access. There are a lot of different moving parts. There are a lot of different device types that need to be factored in. There's a lot of different policies that need to be turned on. So it's important to acknowledge that this is more of a journey than something that you'll achieve immediately overnight. And there's a lot of different entry points. And so what I'll do is I'll walk through a couple of the different options here through our session today. I'll do my best over the course of our discussion to monitor the Q&A. If you have any questions, if there's anything that I can clarify as we go along, please don't hesitate to ask midstream. I'd be happy to try to answer questions as we go along rather than just saving them for the end. But of course, we can do a little Q&A session at the end. The starting point for trusted access, in my mind, is device enrollment. And you'll note that I'm being very particular here about not using the word management, because when it comes to achieving trusted access in the modern workplace, I think we need to be mindful that not all devices are going to be corporate owned and operated. So we want to make sure that when we talk about establishing that initial connection, that initial trust assessment with the device, that we have a solution that can handle both company-owned as well as bring your own device and contractor device scenarios, because all of those device types in most organizations have access to some sensitive business data and applications. And so this initial step of enrolling devices is really key to ensure that all the other things that we want to do as part of kind of the buildup to trusted access can be put in place. I'm going to make a really bold statement here and say that I believe that no organization should allow access to its most sensitive data to devices that it doesn't know, that it hasn't established a trust relationship with. And the reason for that, I think, is fairly clear in my mind. Those devices could be compromised. Those devices could, in future, have data stolen from them and lifted off those devices. And I think it's really important to know the state of the device when it is accessing your most critical data stores. Now, as I mentioned, we want to make sure that we can accommodate company-owned as well as BYOD. I think Jamf is really well known for the innovations that we've made around zero-touch deployment of management capabilities, bringing devices just out of shrink wrap into the management fold without the need for an IT admin on site or a user to do something on the device. Well, within the last 2 years, we also introduced capabilities to bring BYOD devices into that exact same management framework. And what we do there is we leverage technology on the device that allows the user to sign in directly from the settings menu that's built into the phone, using their work-issued credentials and self-enroll the device. This also means that they can unenroll the device at will and really feel as though they are in control of when that device is registered for work and when it is not. The nice thing about this BYOD model is that it also creates what is effectively a work partition, where we can configure the partition, apply policy, control work applications, but also respect end user privacy as it relates to the personal applications that they have on that device. So really with device enrollment, what we're doing is we're establishing a footprint on the device for work. If it's company owned, that footprint is device wide. If it's BYOD, it's a fraction of the device. And within that footprint is where we're going to really be establishing a trusted relationship with the user and the device. And so this is, I think, a critical first step to achieving security in really any environment. The next thing that I want to talk about when it comes to trusted access is how do we ensure that we know that the user is authorized to access that critical data? Well, this is where we need identity binding. And Apple technologies in particular have been left out of many of the identity conversations in the past because the sign-in on the device has been different from the cloud-delivered identity that many organizations have adopted. We want to change that. Jamf has innovated technology that allows users to sign in on the device using their local, using the same identity and credentials that they have that are cloud issued. But what we're able to do here from a provisioning perspective is create those accounts from the very moment that device is being implemented at work, meaning you don't need to create a separate account for the worker on that device. We can create that and sync it with the single sign-on credentials that that user has from the cloud provider. Now, I think it's important to note here, one of the questions I often get is Jamf a cloud identity provider? We are not. And what we actually do here is we provide integrations with all of the leading cloud identity providers or IDPs. I think the ones that we feature most often are Okta, Microsoft Azure AD, Google, Ping. Through the magic of federation, we're actually able to integrate with just about every IDP that's out there, meaning that you can get your Macs connected with that identity provider and use that sign-in information without the need for a separate set of credentials to be managed on the device. A lot of power here in this binding on the device. And we'll talk about a little bit later how we've now taken this technology and mapped it to mobile and other platforms as well, meaning that we can do identity binding on iOS, iPadOS, Android, and Windows as well, all as part of some of the additional work that we're doing with identity and access policies. Once we've enrolled a device and we've brought the user identity and role to that device, this is when we want to start to assess the device and make sure that it meets our organizational standards. When it comes to security, in my mind, the very first thing we need to be doing with any Mac or mobile that's being utilized for work is just make sure that it's practicing good device hygiene. And this is where Jamf has some really great capabilities that allow us to determine, or I guess establish, what our standards are going to be by individual device or group or organizational wide, set these compliance standards, if you will, and then audit them over time and ensure that those devices aren't just deployed with those configurations, but that those configurations are maintained, especially as users are accessing those critical applications that are presumably in the cloud or sitting behind a firewall in your data center. Now, device hardening isn't the only thing that we want to do. We want to make sure that we have active monitoring for more sophisticated threat. Jamf has some of the best of breed capabilities that have been developed for Mac, for iOS, and for Android, looking for malware and malicious exploits that are happening on the device. The capabilities that we've built all leverage native frameworks. And what that means is that we're actually able to deliver these protections in a very efficient and effective way. And we're able to prevent many of these exploits from occurring, meaning we can keep the user productive and not distract them with blocking activity that oftentimes prevents their utilization of the device. Now, device hardening, malware protection, those are two of the most important aspects of endpoint protection, but there's a third pillar of capability that we also believe is a really essential component of achieving trusted access, and that is managing user-initiated risk. Users are oftentimes viewed as the weakest link in the chain, and this is why we see so many attacks targeting users themselves. phishing attacks, smishing attacks. And what you see here on the screen is just an example of one of the modern day exploits that we see so often. And it's an attempt at getting a user to click on a malicious link, which will then trigger a sequence of things to be downloaded to the device or information stolen from that user directly. This is where Jamf has built additional capabilities that operate not just within a single application like email, but device-wide, and actually allow us to prevent any of those internet-hosted threats from impacting that user or that device. And we've also thought through how we deliver the notifications and the alerts to that end user in a way that is immersive. So what you see on the screen here is the fact that Jamf leverages native notifications on the device to inform users when a workflow might be getting interrupted. But we've also provided businesses with the opportunity to provide customized notifications that allow them to communicate directly to their users when policy has been tripped up and that the user is perhaps not getting to where they ultimately wanted to go. Because we know that this type of user-initiated risk is something that is going to be occurring on any device that the user is touching, we've made sure that we're able to deliver this across all modern operating systems. You see here on the screen that this technology is supported not just on mobile with iOS and Android, but also on macOS and Windows with a very consistent interface and one that has the exact same policies being applied regardless of the device that the user has chosen to pick up and utilize at that moment. Now, all of this, of course, is great if we're simply trying to stop the threat. Oftentimes, we also want to make sure that we're educating users. The applications that we're delivering these technologies through all have a user interface that is intuitive, easy to consume, and includes educational capabilities as well, should your organization want to adopt that. Now, so far, I've talked about enrolling devices, BYOD and company-owned, Mac and mobile. We've talked about binding identity to the device so that we know who the user is from the moment they initiate a transaction to an application. We've talked about the 3 different pillars of endpoint protection, bringing together compliance audits, malware protection, and user risk management. And now what we want to do is really bring it all together with our zero trust policies. Jamf does have a purpose-built modern zero trust network access solution, or ZTNA. In many ways, our ZTNA solution is it's a VPN replacement. It's an alternative that actually works on your modern devices in a way that doesn't break applications or result in a lot of latency or just bad performance on the device. This delivers a fantastic user experience and connectivity to both your on-prem applications that sit behind a firewall, as well as those that might be SaaS hosted, where you want to do some richer conditional access policies based on a lot of the metadata that comes along with these connections. But zero trust access isn't just limited to the Jamf solution. We actually have capabilities to signal to third-party solutions like Google BeyondCorp, to some Amazon infrastructure using Amazon verified access, and to Microsoft using Microsoft's conditional access, allowing you to choose where and when your conditional access policies are going to be implemented. Again, because we know that your users are varied, that they're using different platforms of their choice, that sometimes it's going to be a contractor that might need access to your most critical applications, and that encrypted tunnel or that VPN alternative is going to be something you're going to need to give them on a device that's managed by a third party. Jamf's Zero Trust Access solution actually supports all modern operating systems again, and is something that is bootstrapped from the identity integration that I talked about earlier. So this is really where we leverage identity, not just for device sign-in, but for application access, and make it so that the end user's workflow is streamlined. If they're using a device where that sign-in on the initial sign-in to the device is tied to that cloud identity provider, we can reduce the number of MFA prompts that user encounters and reduce the number of times that they have to sign in by simply carrying tokens forward from the device sign-in to their most critical applications. This solution also means that we can protect your organization's applications by ensuring that only authorized users on enrolled devices that meet your requirements, only those devices are the ones that are able to spin up encrypted tunnels and connect into the back end where you host these applications. So there's a lot of capability in this aspect of the solution set, and something that we could certainly unpack, I think, another day with some more details. I think just a couple of additional aspects to highlight here is that the Jamf solutions, we start to talk about this phase of trusted access, is that there is continuous device monitoring occurring, meaning we are checking to ensure that the device is still managed, that it is configured the way that you want it to be configured, and that there are no active threats when this connection is being established. It also means that as the user is connected, should the state of their device change and turn negative, meaning a policy is being violated, we can snap a connection in real time and keep your applications and data safe, and keep the user disconnected until the issue is addressed. And addressing the issue, whatever it might be, because always something is going to go sideways, this is where that initial footprint of device enrollment really comes in handy. It's that relationship that we have with the device, the ability to perform management functions either on the full device or on that container that's set aside for work, that allows us to fix things when they go wrong. So whether it be patching an application, updating an OS, notifying the user that there's some action for them to take, there's actually a lot of actions that you can take, both those that leverage the MDM protocol or that go beyond the MDM protocol, because there's a lot that Jamf is able to do through scripting and other capabilities that we have on the device that are unique to our platform that allow you to build up a really robust remediation, set of remediation steps when there is threat that's encountered, but also to automate a lot of these actions so that the overhead on your teams is actually reduced and your team can do more with less resourcing. I think what we want to do here is make sure that as your organization is allowing more devices to be utilized for work, so in addition to your Mac footprint, for example, you're allowing a whole suite of mobile devices, both iOS and Android, to come on board. We want to make sure that you don't have to double your staffing in order to support all those devices and new connections that are coming in, but you can still achieve that outcome of trusted access, and ensure that only authorized users on enrolled devices that meet your requirements are able to get in. Now, as I mentioned at the start, trusted access has a lot of different moving components, and that really does span those kind of legacy product silos of device management, or MDM, identity and access capabilities, as well as endpoint security, and even some web security capabilities that are in the mix there. It's a journey that I think every organization has to go on to decide what's the entry point for them. Not every organization is going to start with management. Not every organization necessarily is going to start with identity. But I think what you want to do is ultimately aim to ensure that you have all of these capabilities lined up so that you truly can appreciate the outcome of trusted access and really build the most resilient set of policies for your organization over the long haul. What I wanted to do now, just a couple of slides, is really talk a little bit more about that journey, talk a little bit more in detail about the capability sets that are available as you start to think about those different kind of key areas of trusted access. And the first one, when it comes to device enrollment, Jamf does have a really extensive set of capabilities in management. And I just wanted to touch on the fact that the same platform that provides management capabilities for company-owned devices is the one that we would utilize for BYOD, meaning no separate console. It's the same interface where you go in and see all the devices that are company-owned as well as those that are BYOD in the same interface, using the same groups and identity bindings, so that you really can get a sense for all the devices that are within the fleet and touching ultimately the sensitive applications that you've deployed to workers. And when it comes to those applications, I think it's really important to note that we're not just solving a problem here for IT staff in terms of that centralized administrative console. We've also thought through the workflow for users that are allowed or encouraged to utilize the platform and the ecosystem that has been built up around and between these devices. So for a user who feels free to move from an iPhone to a Mac to an iPad, what we've done is we've built a service that we call self-service that can be branded and customized for your organization, so that as that user goes in to find the applications that are available to them for work based on their identity, their role, the device they've been given, et cetera, that interface is consistent, that they don't have to learn a new tool or follow a new workflow as they move from one platform type or form factor to another. And when it comes to applications, we also realize that not every application is going to be available in one of the app stores. That sometimes you are building your own custom applications that you need to deploy, or that you're leveraging third-party applications that you need to go and retrieve from a website or a download repository. You need to package that up appropriately, monitor it, scan it, and then ultimately push it out to a set of devices that are going to use that for work. We've built an entire set of tools within our management platform that automates all of this for you. So there are hundreds, if not thousands, of titles within this repository that are automatically maintained, that allow you to build policies around, and also allow you to deploy according to your organization's standard for application management. So the lifecycle component there is for you to define. On the security front, I just wanted to say that from a Jamf perspective, we think it's really important that you think consistently about your security policies, and you not have separate policies for laptop and mobile, for example. It's important that if you are going to establish secure device baselines, if you have compliance requirements that you have to adhere to, that you're mindful of those standards across form factors, and that your protections when it comes to sophisticated threat protection are going to be consistent and delivered through a consistent interface for your workers, no matter what device type they choose to pick up. This is where, from a Jamf perspective, our Protect product is actually designed to use across Mac and mobile. It's the same ultimate set of capabilities, but built in a way that delivers the best experience and the best efficacy for the platform on which it's deployed. The important thing here is to really focus on the administrative interface and just show that we're really focused on making sure that these products can be deployed and activated. A licensed product is really meaningless to an organization. You want that license to be deployed to a device and turned on so that your policies are actually taking effect. We also want you to get all of your insights in one place. So regardless of whether you're looking at the security status of an Android device, or an iPad, or a Mac, we want you to see all of that in one place. And we want your controls to be consistent as well, so that as your organization documents what your policies should be, it's easy to apply them across all the devices that you have under management. From a compliance perspective, many of you probably already have a lot of Macs that you're managing, and you're well aware of the macOS Security and Compliance Project. Jamf aligns very closely with MSCP, and we actually have built a graphical MSCP editor. If you're not aware of that, that is available hanging off of the GitHub page. That actually allows you to choose the standards that you want to start with as your baseline and edit as you see fit. Makes it very easy to right out of the box go in and really fine tune the compliance standards for your organization, deploy those settings using Jamf Pro, which is our management interface, and then audit those configurations through Jamf Protect. I think compliance standards is really where we start to see the value of breaking down the walls that exist between these legacy product silos, so that you can really get the best of service deployment and activation, configuration of devices, and then monitoring and auditing over time to ensure that you've got consistent alignment with those standards. I see a question in the chat around users removing management on BYOD devices, and the answer to this one is yes. The user can choose to remove management, and this is a really important, I think, concept. One that gives the user a sense of control, gives the user a sense of their privacy being preserved. But when you implement management in the context of trusted access, your organization gets the assurances that that user, once they've removed themselves from management, no longer has access to your critical applications and data. So if the user was enrolled to a management service to begin with on BYOD, when they unenroll, all of their work applications and work data goes away. It's removed from the device while their personal information is maintained. Also, when they unenroll, you lose all of the risk signal coming from the security product that we're talking about here. So trusted access really does allow you to bring these services together in tightly bound policies so that when users do make a choice like that to disable a service or unenroll, that you lose the signal and they lose the access. As I mentioned on the endpoint security side, it's not enough to just harden the device. We've seen so many vulnerabilities exposed in these modern operating systems that we have to account for things to go wrong. We also have to account for the attackers to get really clever with what they craft to target Mac and mobile devices. I think just this year alone, we've seen some really interesting threats against the platforms that we're talking about here. We saw the first viable instance of ransomware for Mac OS. We saw very sophisticated cryptojacking that targeted Apple Silicon. We even saw some very pervasive, persistent instances of mobile spyware that targeted not just iOS, but Android as well, and really gathered some very sensitive information and remained hidden for an extended period of time. This is where you want modern capabilities that are able to look for any signal of compromise using all of the available APIs that are delivered from the OS vendors. It's also where we want to make sure that we're cutting off any of the threat vectors that are exposed on these devices, including the user route, things like phishing. What you see on the right-hand side on this slide is just one of the dashboards that comes with Jamf Protect, showing you some of the detection capabilities that the platform can surface. What I also wanted to show you is the policy configuration that we have around user-initiated risk. So often we talk about phishing, malware downloads, cryptojacking. Those are all really solid examples of internet-hosted threat to our modern platforms. But there's the classic content filtering that is also relevant to many organizations. And so particularly on company-owned devices and workers that are anywhere workers who are allowed to work from home, those are scenarios where you might want your network-based or your web-based policies to be enforced. And we have a lot of different ways to do that within the Jamf infrastructure. Everything from cloud-hosted proxy infrastructure to sanitized DNS, and even capabilities that sit on the device and allow local filtering with minimal reporting and privacy preservation, allowing you to strike that right balance in certain scenarios for user privacy to be respected, but organizational policy to be adhered to as well. Really robust set of capabilities here as we extend into web protection. And as I mentioned earlier, around the sophisticated malware prevention capabilities, this isn't just limited to external attack and malware. The footprint that we have on the device also allows you to enforce acceptable use policies of drives and other ways of information flow within the device. So if you want to implement a policy that prevents data loss via unencrypted USB, that is absolutely a policy that you could implement as part of this overarching, very comprehensive endpoint protection capabilities from Jamf. I do not have time to go into detail for all of the different aspects of the Zero Trust Network Access solution from Jamf, but I did think that this visual really does help show how all of these different capabilities come together to help you achieve the outcome of trusted access. What you're seeing here is device initiation across all modern endpoints. using identity as the bootstrap, where we bounce against the identity provider that your organization has chosen, Okta, Azure AD, Google, et cetera. And we use that to bootstrap the identity tokens that live on the device and the encryption keys that are going to be used to tunnel those users, these authorized users, into the applications that you've predetermined that they should have access to. And whether those applications sit in the cloud, they're SaaS hosted, or they sit on-prem behind a firewall, each individual application will have its own microtunnel that is encrypted and spun up to connect the user to those applications. Those tunnels can be individually broken based on policy. So the policy can vary per application. And should you choose to apply it, any non-business traffic, so that's basically any internet-facing connection that your user initiates, would be able to be processed by our web threat prevention capability. So effectively giving you not just security policy, but content filtering as well. Jamf's work with identity does not stop with the virtual world. Even though we spend a lot of time talking about the sensitive applications and data that your users are accessing, your users are also going to be accessing physical spaces in many situations, whether it be a building or a vending machine or a locked cabinet in a healthcare setup, for example. Many organizations utilize the plastic access key cards today. We have found a way to eliminate the need for that extra physical carry along that the user has. And we've done it in partnership with Apple and a company called Swift Connect, where we're actually able to deliver those access cards into the Apple Wallet and the Android Wallet and the Apple Watch, all the mobile technologies that your users are using to carry around with them everywhere they go. They can now use that to gain access to these physical spaces that you've protected. This is just one example of how we believe identity is not just important to get into devices, but it's critical for every workflow that the user is initiating throughout their work life, whether it be to applications or to physical spaces. And I mentioned at the start the importance of making sure that we have a solution for BYOD. I don't have time to go into all of the detail here, but I did want to show just a high-level visual of how the Jamf technologies can apply to a BYOD environment that's been registered using account-driven user enrollment. That's the technology where the user goes into the settings, kind of enrolls their own device and pulls it into the fold. In that scenario, we have a work container. Think of it as these green apps that have been installed on this device. Within that work container, the user is able to utilize the self-service app that I showed you earlier to choose the applications that get installed on their device for work. Those applications are then managed. And within that container and for those managed applications, you can configure automatic zero trust access policies to be applied so that the VPN is automatically turned on and encrypted for all of those application connections. And you can also configure policies that include data loss prevention policies to lock down data flows within the device and to harden that work container and ensure that all those applications are kept up to date and are free of risk and vulnerability. So a lot of capabilities that can be deployed to BYOD to really allow you to achieve a like for like with what you're ultimately getting with your fully managed devices, but really just in a corner of that device that the user ultimately owns and controls. I'm sure many people are wondering what the end user experience is like here. Well, in many cases, the end users don't even have to know that this service exists. We've built technology that sits on top of the zero-touch deployment capabilities that Jamf has for management that allow applications to automatically be installed and automatically activated. That said, identity is a critical component of achieving trusted access. We want the user to sign in once so that you know who the user is, that you verify that identity and you trust the access requests that are coming out from that device. The Jamf Trust app is where that identity is ultimately captured. And you're seeing it here in its mobile form. We have the same implementation for desktop and other operating systems so that the user gets the same experience and there is only one app that they need to be trained on. For us, it's the security app that we call Jamf Trust. and it is available across not only iOS and macOS stores, but the Android Play Store, as well as with Microsoft as well. So all this is where the user would bootstrap their secure access using the cloud-issued identity that your business has selected for them. As I start to round things out here, I did want to just give a nod to Jamf Threat Labs. This is our team that's responsible for active research in the threat space. You'll see them presenting at global conferences like Black Hat and RSA. They have 20 years plus of experience across the team, not just within macOS detections or mobile malware prevention, but also in network security. We've got a lot of accolades and press coverage from this team's work, and we even have a number of zero-day vulnerabilities that have been attributed to the team, including the most recent iOS update 16.5 has a nod to some research that came out of Jamf Threat Labs and a vulnerability that we found with a coprocessor on iOS. The platform as a whole is very extensible. There are APIs and scripts that are available if you want to do more than is available just directly through the interface. We have an entire Jamf marketplace that, if you're not aware, it's a great site to go and look to see if any of your other technology partners or application solution developers are partners of ours, so that right out of the box, you can make a lot of those capabilities align with this trusted access outcome that you're ultimately looking to achieve. We have a number of industry workflows that we support, from bedside patient care to clinical communications and even electronic flight bags in transportation, really allowing businesses to do more in a streamlined fashion with very industry-specific workflow support. And of course, we have a lot of partnerships, but I think the ones that we leverage quite extensively are those with Apple, who we work with very closely, with Microsoft, where we have a lot of great integrations, not just with the identity capabilities, but across their entire security portfolio, and with Google, where we've done a lot to kind of build upon not just the identity work there as well, but also our recent support of Safe Internet on Chromebooks, and of course our ability to protect Android devices extensively. So really important to make sure that those partnerships continue to thrive. If there's any examples that we can share with you, please don't hesitate to reach out to ensure that our technologies would work appropriately in the environment that you've got. The last thing I'll mention before I check the Q&A here is to just give also a note here that for over a decade now, Jamf has made a commitment to providing same-day support across all of our products, meaning all new hardware, software, and updates from Apple, Jamf is going to provide support for on the day of release. We do not want your security tools or your management tools to hold you back from upgrading, or to prevent your users from being functional if they were to upgrade outside of the guidance that perhaps you're providing. So the moment that new updates are available from Apple, Jamf's technologies will be there to support them as well. As we kind of close out, for those of you that follow the analyst community or are looking for third-party validation of some of these solutions, I did want to just acknowledge that we've received a lot of recognition in the industry for our solutions. IDC, for many years in a row now, has named Jamf a leader in unified endpoint management for Apple devices. We've also recently appeared in a GigaOM radar for patch management, where we were named a leader and fast mover. We were one of the original vendors to offer mobile threat defense, and we've been covered by Gartner from the very beginning. And we are also a representative vendor from Gartner in their Zero Trust Network Access coverage. Lots of capabilities, lots of analysts covering this space. I'm pleased to see that Jamf continuously meets the high standards that these organizations are looking for as they publish their most recent results and market assessments. I'll do a very quick skim of the chat. This is a good opportunity to get in there if there's any questions that you have here as we start to wrap things up. We did address a question along the way around BYOD, but I see another one here around asking if Jamf BYOD provides the same management capabilities as we do for company-owned devices. I think for this one, I'll say it's a subset of capabilities. And the subset is really meant to be in place because the BYOD solution is privacy aware and privacy preserving. So you would not be able to manage all of the applications on the device, for example, but you would be able to configure those data loss prevention capabilities on a BYOD device that is enrolled with Jamf. So that's actually a very important feature add, I believe, that a lot of organizations have not taken advantage of on a fully managed device because they can always do a wipe if the device is lost. But with BYO, it's really important to retain control of that information within the device and ensure that only authorized applications are able to touch and consume your business data that belongs within them. I see a question here about Jamf Protect and SIM. So I can tell you that Jamf security products across the board all allow data to be exported and utilized outside of our platform. What that means is that you can export the data into a SIM, a SOAR, an XDR, an EDR solution. Wherever your security analytics are taking place, we want you to have the richest set of data that's available. We recently announced a partnership with Microsoft Sentinel. We do have a number of pre-built dashboards and playbooks that are available directly in the Sentinel console. Very similar set of solutions over in Splunk. And we work with a number of vendors, and we actually utilize a common event format within our security reporting. So it's very easy to not only use it with those pre-built integrations, but to utilize it with your own teams and your own solutions as well. It's very easy to parse that data that we've provided in there. Within our service, we actually have a risk API. If you'd rather just go in and query the current risk status of a device rather than having to process all the historical logs, that is also something that's available to you. And I see another question here about Jamf Private Access working with a VPN. I think for that, I would actually suggest that you think about Jamf Private Access or our ZTNA, our Zero Trust Network Access solution, as an alternative to VPN. A lot of VPNs have historically, specifically on mobile, caused applications to break because they just don't deal well with latency. They don't deal well with network transitions, meaning users who might be on cellular 1 minute and on Wi-Fi the very next. The technology that we've incorporated into our Zero Trust Access solution is actually really, really good with network transitions. And it's also very quick with how it spins up that encrypted tunnel and how it also provides first packet authorization on the back end, meaning you can actually hide or cloak your backend infrastructure and allow only those authorized users on your enrolled devices that are meeting your standards to allow to have those connections come inbound. So with that, I see we are up on time. I think I got through all of the key questions here. Corinne, I think I will turn it back to you and see if there's anything else here as we start to wrap up. So just thanks for the time.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you everyone for joining us today. If you would like to review the presentation, please check out our on-demand page for more. Have a good day.